Now, I grew up in a very white bread Australian household, mum and a dad, brothers and sisters, that I was the youngest for a long time. And I didn't have a lot of exposure to different cultures and different sides of society. And as I got older and I was able to take control of my environment and my experiences, I still didn't seek out those differences in culture. And it wasn't until I really started working with organisations and I was forced to deal with different cultures that I kind of fell in love with the variety and the different cultural norms that we come into contact with. And that allowed me to start to look at it from a neuroscience perspective and start to think about, well, what cultural norms affect social awareness and how does this all sort of tie in? And first of all, quick recap on cultural norms. These are the beliefs and the values and the behaviours that are shared among members of a particular society. So these norms play a really important role in shaping social behaviour because they define what's considered acceptable or unacceptable within a given community. And this changes from community to community. Now, the influence of cultural norms on social behaviour, we can see this in a variety of different contexts. From an individual level, the way that individuals interact with each other in social situations, to the way that they perceive and they respond to stimuli in their environment, even to how about they talk about their own culture and how they promote their own culture. Now, for example, in some cultures, it is considered rude to speak loudly in public, while in others, it is seen as a sign of confidence and assertiveness. Similarly, in some cultures, direct eye contact is a sign of respect, but in others, it's seen as a challenge or a threat. Now, we've also got individualist and collective societies as well, and depending on where you are, it might be okay for you to argue in public. And if people on the sidelines watch on, they're considered to be the rude ones. In other societies, if you argue out in public, then you're considered to be the ones who are being rude. So there's no right or wrong. The important thing to understand is that experiences and environments shape who we are and how we behave. So these cultural norms are really deeply ingrained in people from a young age. And as they are transmitted through socialization processes like family and education and media, they develop and they get stronger and they get further and further ingrained into who this person is. Now, when we take a look at the underlying neuroscience here, cultural norms are stored in the brain as implicit memory. And that's a type of memory that is non-conscious and it's automatic. This is just the stuff that just happens without us thinking and it makes us up who we are. So implicit memory is formed through repeated exposure to a particular stimulus or behaviour, i.e. how we grow up, our environment and our experiences. And this leads to the formation of neural networks that can be activated, boom, automatically in response to similar stimuli. So the influence of cultural norms on social behaviour, it's not limited to our conscious thoughts. It's not limited to our deliberate actions. Research has proven that cultural norms shape non-conscious processes such as attention and perception and emotion and desires and how we perceive ourselves as well. How that's an important part. Now, we know that Western cultures are more likely to focus on focal objects in a scene, for example, like individuals from East Asian cultures, if they're watching the same thing, they're more likely to pay attention to the background context, right? There's a really simple differentiation between it. Now, that you might think, what the heck's this got to do with culture, Dave? We're talking about culture here. Now you're talking about a scene. One's looking at the focal point, one's looking at the background. Why do they do that? It comes back to cultural norms. The difference in attentional focus was attributed in this study that I'm referring to cultural differences. And those cultural differences place different importance on the individual versus the group. Now, the impact of cultural norms on social behaviour can also be seen in the way that individuals respond to things like stress and anxiety and even shame. And research has shown us that people from collectivist cultures, which place a greater emphasis on group harmony and cooperation, they're more likely to seek support in response to stresses, while people from individualistic cultures, and they're the ones that place a greater emphasis on personal autonomy and achievement, which is Western culture, for the most part, it is starting to see a shift now. They're more likely to use coping strategies such as problem solving and also avoidance, right? That's just part of our culture. So when we look at the underlying neuroscience of cultural norms, this suggests that these differences in coping strategies are related to the functioning of the brain's stress response system. And this includes your hypothalamic pituitary adrenaline axis and the sympathetic adrenaline medullary system. Right? Now, studies have shown that collective cultures tend to have lower levels of cortisol, and that's that hormone that's released in response to stress, and higher levels of oxytocin, that hormone that's involved in social bonding and affiliation. Now, it's these differences in hormonal profiles that have been linked to the differences in social support-seeking behavior and coping strategies. If you're used to getting positive reinforcement when you seek out to social support, you're going to continue to do this. And this is a cultural thing. Cultural norms ingrain this in us, and they play a significant role in shaping social behavior and also the underlying neuroscience, which shows us that these norms are stored in the brain as implicit memory, which can influence both conscious and non-conscious processes. Now, we can see this impact that cultural norms has on social behavior in a variety of different contexts, from attentional focus to coping strategies in response to stress and anxiety and shame and all those weird and wonderful things. But when we take time to understand how these cultural norms can help us to be better versions of ourselves and how they can help us to drive more positive social behavior, this is where it can inform the development of how we move forward and the interventions and the strategies that we put together to promote positive social outcomes in different contexts. So we can take all of that information, and now that we know it, we can bundle it up and we can present it in a way that allows us not to be carried away with our cultural norms and the things that are ingrained in us, and also to be a little bit more flexible with other people if they don't understand us or they don't get what we're talking about right away, because it might feel very unnatural to them. The same as you walk into a different culture and there's a whole bunch of the way that people look and they dress and they talk and they behave is different. This is the same for everybody. So just remember, those cultural norms are ingrained deep, deep within us. And when we understand that, we can take steps to overcome them for ourselves and for other people. Bye now.